Okay, I got to get back to work here, but somebody sent me a note the other day. They were watching my Schwinn video. I did a video on how to detect a genuine Chicago, USA made Schwinn frame. And that video was more specific. It was more about these cantilever cruiser style frames or the straight bars. And I showed this frame. And I talked about how it had been a 5-speed bike. And somebody reached out to me recently and they said, hey man, that might be an original clunker frame, clunker with a K, which I knew what that is. I know all this history, obviously, but I had forgotten what year this was, and I just looked it up, and it's in 1979, and now I remember that I knew that. So I know that this can't be an original clunker frame. However, it's a 1979, and the clunkers were made for a short period of time in 1978. So, you know, it's an interesting thing because the guys up in Northern California, I think they coined the term clunker. They certainly coined the name mountain bike. You know, Charlie Kelly and and Gary Fisher. They were partners. And turns out, this is a story from Charlie Kelly, that he was in talks. He was talking to Schwinn. I don't know if he wrote him a letter or what, but he had mentioned how they were using the term clunker with a K, but he didn't do it to get Schwinn in any kind of trouble. But his story is that Schwinn chose to change it from clunker to I think it's Spitfire, just to avoid any sort of copyright issues, you know, covering their ass, so to speak. So that's why they ended up doing that. But while I have this out, I'll explain to you why I know this was a 5-speed bike, and also point out the issues that the details that will tell you that this is an original USA Chicago made frame. All right. Now, the first thing everybody notices, these nice smooth areas, this roundness here. People call it Philip brazing. It's not. This is a flash welded thing. It's called electroforged. It's an electroforged head tube. What that is, if you look in here, there's a seam. I don't know if you can see that. You can't see it. I'm not really showing it to you. But there's a seam in here. This is 2 pieces, flash welded together with lugs that this tube and this tube fit into. And then they sanded this. And you can always see it. If you really look carefully, it's not perfect. Here and here. You can always feel it too. So they do a nice job, but it's never perfect. And then the head badge is held on by these flathead screws. Your serial number for the clunker is always going to be right here. So the later model bikes, they have the serial number right here on this head tube. Earlier models have the serial number right here on the dropout. And the earlier ones than that have the serial number on the bottom of the bottom bracket. More details about how to tell if it was a USA bike is the pinches on the chain stays here and on the seat stays where they meet the dropout. Chinese bikes won't have that. This is what you call a fender bridge, not a brake bridge, right? So it's got this nice curve. It's hollow in here. It's rounded. This is how I know this was an ATUM 5-speed drum brake. Okay, if this had been a caliper brake's a side pull brake that's got the cable going in on the side, then it would have a brake bridge, and that would be a flat piece of steel welded here and here that comes up and goes across the top. Because this doesn't have that, I know it was an ATUM brake. All right, and it's spaced for a 5-speed as well. Another thing to tell if it's an American bike are the seams right here where the chain stays meet the bottom bracket. It's from a cold forge ramming process. And then there's a seam on the bottom of this bottom bracket. Now, after 1983, you know, Schwinn sold out. Well, 83, 84, 85, Murray in Tennessee was churning out Schwinns. They bought out all the Schwinn parts. And you could denote that bike. It has all the details this bike has, except it does not have the seams where these chainstays are forced into the bottom bracket. They didn't have the tooling for that. So they have an extra piece of steel inside the bottom bracket to reinforce it. And that is pretty much, I think I got it all. So yeah, the electroforged head tube, flathead screws, pinching on the stays, the seams here. There's little tiny seams there, and the seam on the bottom bracket. The Chinese bikes will have this same kickstand thing, so I don't always point that out. But that's how you tell. And then this one here, again, being a 5-speed bike, it had front and rear brakes. Again, The rear, I know, was a drum brake, but the front had the caliper side pull brakes because it has the sticker on here that's warning you about the wet rims. Give yourself a little extra stopping distance. So while this is not a 1978 clunker frame, it is a 1979 frame. So this would be a fine frame to build up into that same bike. It'd be neat, you know. The only issue with this particular frame is a little dent on this top tube here. It's not bad. That could be filled, you know, no problem. This frame could be cleaned up really nice and restored. And I'll tell you, if you had this built with the 8-ton brake and the proper wheels and everything, and you put the clunker chain guard on it, you'd be okay. You know, it'd be kind of fun to do that. And who knows? You know, I would imagine that probably never happened coming out of the Schwinn factory. If the story from Charlie Kelly is true, where they were nervous about the copyright, they may have taken all of those Schwinn clunker chain guards and painted over them, sand them out, whatever, because they didn't want to get into trouble. But the few that went out there are out there, and people want a lot of money for those frames, or excuse me, those chain guards. So I also think that the whole year of '78 with the 5 speeds were not clunkers. So you'd have to look that up so you know which months. I believe this is a May of 1979. I just looked it up, and if I can remember, I did a screenshot. So if I remember, I'll put that at the end on this. And if you're wondering what your frame is year-wise, just go to Google and type in Schwinn serial number, and then it's going to give you a list. Usually the first one will tell you it's the lookup tool. But you have to read it really good, because on this one I thought this was a EO, but actually it was an EQ. So, you know, when I did an EO, it told me it was like a 1959, which was not right. And then when I did the EO, it gave me 2 choices. It'll show you the bike, and it'll say, hey, is the serial number here, or is it here? If I would have selected here, it would have taken me to the 1959. When I selected here, it gave me the 1979. So, you know, I can't tell you what your frame is if you're not reading the numbers right or whatever. You've got to do your own research. I'm just telling you this frame is a 1979 5-speed drum brake frame specifically. So if anybody's interested in this, let me know. I got to lighten my load here. I'm not going to build this bike. I highly doubt it. I don't need it. And if you're curious, there's a 62, 63, 1 year only, double continuous, double straight bar frame. Very desirable, and that's being built up to a 10-speed clunker, which who knows if I'm ever going to finish that. So that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope maybe you learned something. And you know, some of you might have been curious when you saw me do that original video. I don't know if I said it earlier or not, but that video's got something like 70,000 views, and I don't get a lot of videos that do that. So to me, it's a big deal. And I just wanted to let you know. 79. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great day.